السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
كيف حالك؟
الحمد لله كويس.
الحمد لله.
الحمد لله.
You're all set and cozy.
That's everybody? Okay, thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Simsbury Spirit Council and the Simsbury Public Library to our April Let's Talk discussion series. Tonight, we're going to be having a discussion on Arab American and Muslim culture. We're just looking to, dispel some stereotypes and recognize contributions. And again, a major point of our Let's Talk discussions is, again, to have, discussions about topics that we might not ordinarily have, again, to shed light, to, shed light so we can remove some biases and perhaps stereotypes, and to hear some real stories from real people, where we're not getting our information from the television or from other sources. And so it's always a great opportunity when we have our discussions to hear real information, real stories from real people. And so we're going to have our tonight's discussion. We have three panelists who have agreed to be with us. They will have an opportunity to speak. We have some questions. If there's anyone in the audience, if you have questions, you can raise your hand on your screen, or if you wish to send a message through the chat feature. We're also looking at that throughout the discussion this evening. So so my name is Nkosi Lee. I am the moderator for this evening. I'm just here with some of our other Spirit Council members, especially with the event subcommittee and the greater council as well. And so this is what we've been charged to do, bring discussions that lead to diversity and just the opening of thoughts and ideas, within the Simsbury and greater Hartford community. So tonight, we are going to hear from our panelists is the Imam Safwan Shaikh, also Mariam Bitar, and Haj Mustafa as well. So we are thankful that they've taken the time out to be with us and to share, a little bit about who they are and share, a little bit about their story and history with us this evening. So I hope we can all look forward to a great conversation. I'm gonna have some questions asked. And again, if you're part of the audience, you have some questions, again, you could use the raise your hand feature, or if you wish to send something through the chat, we're able to do that as well. So I'm just gonna take a minute to introduce the panelists, and then we will hear from them, and then we'll open up with some of the questions, go through a little Q&A. And so first is the Imam Safwan Shaikh, and he serves as the religious director at the Farmington Valley American Muslim Center in Avon, Connecticut. He has served the larger Connecticut community for a decade. He completed his Arabic studies with honors in less than a year at Baina Institute. He then went on to Kalam Seminary to complete his studies in Islamic jurisprudence, Quranic hermeneutics, and advanced theology. He was honored to be selected as the Muslim Interfaith Coordinator at the esteemed Chautauqua Institute. He leads classes and discussions on various Islamic topics dealing with interfaith dialogue, Quranic exegesis, prophetic commentary, and identity formation in across the country. He is currently completing his Master's of Religious Studies and Islamic Chaplaincy at the Hartford Seminary. He holds and continues to pursue Islamic licenses in the sacred sciences. All right, so we thank you, Imam Safwan. Next is Mariam Bitar. She's the coordinator for Muslim life at Trinity College. Mariam was born and raised in Damascus, Syria. After coming to the US, she earned her BA in International Studies at Trinity College in 2016. During her time as an undergraduate, Ms. Battar served as Vice President of the Muslim Student Association. Ms. Battar holds a Juris Doctorate from the University of Connecticut School of Law and is currently pursuing her LLM in Human Rights and Social Justice. At UConn Law, she served as President of the Muslim Law Students Association. Ms. Battar is dedicated to interfaith dialogue, outreach, and understanding. She spends most of her time in Connecticut advocating religious freedom, tolerance, and social justice. In the summer of 2018, she worked as a legal intern at the Religious Freedom Institute in Washington, D.C. Ms. Battar has also attended numerous seminars for religious freedom, including interfaith seminars at Princeton University, Baylor Law School, BYU, and more. She has been featured as a speaker in a series of panels called Honest Conversations with Your Muslim Neighbor, organized by the Muslim Coalition of Connecticut. And last but not least is Haj Mustafa. She's a Simsbury High School alumni. She graduated back in 2019. She's currently a double majoring in political science and international law, rights, and justice at the University of Connecticut. She's also a part of the accelerated law program at UConn. So again, thank you for our three panelists with all of your expertise and experience. I guess we look forward to the conversation. So please, if there's any thing else you wish to share with us, we please, now's the time to do that. Imam Safwan, we could start with you and go to Miriam and then to Haj.
I just want to say thank you to the Spirit Council and everybody who has allowed us and given us a platform to share our thoughts and experiences regarding this topic. And I used to live in Simsbury. I recently just moved to Farmington. I don't know if I'm still allowed here, if that's okay. But I used to live in Simsbury, right next to the Iron Horse Boulevard, next to Simsbury Bank. So I know the town really, really well. And it's just a pleasure to be here. Full disclosure or spoilers, I guess, I am not Arab, right? And so we'll kind of use that as an ironic learning method, if there is such a thing, to talk about the difference between being Arab, being Muslim. Are they the same thing? And what does that entail? So again, it's a pleasure to be here, and I see some familiar faces as well from other work that we've done with the Farmington Valley, and it's just a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you so much. Such a beautiful topic to talk about, and being Arab and Muslim is always confusing. So I am also the Middle Eastern Law Student Association president, and I founded that organization to separate between being Arab and being a Muslim. And I'm also your neighbor. I live in West Hartford, so thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for having me. I grew up in Simsbury. I know the area. I know a lot of people in the town and the surrounding towns. Love the Simsbury School. As a great representative for that. That's pretty much it. I don't have anything else to say.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm gonna just ask also to the audience, if you wish, you do not have to, keep your cameras off. We just, like to have a, it's a conversation and a discussion, but it is, definitely, how you feel about it, but we're definitely just open that up to you that, it makes it, I guess, a little more communal when we can see each other's faces, but that's still the option is definitely yours if that's what you, if you choose to have your camera off. Oh yes, and also we will have a survey at the end of our discussion tonight, which will be featured in the chat section. So if you could take a few minutes at the end of the discussion to fill that out for us, we would appreciate the feedback and to help us as we continue to move forward. All right, so I guess we're gonna start with Safwan again. I don't know if we ring a bell with I guess it sounds perhaps as an icebreaker, or I guess some just a greeting or something that you had done previously on another discussion with Reverend Gene Ott.
Yeah, so Reverend Gene and I have done a lot of events together. I've heard him speak and he mentioned something to us, and he said that, you know, there's something that you say that's really profound, I guess. And I'm trying to think what that was. And I don't know what it is. So it's either that he's being nice, as he always is, or I just can't remember what it was. But what I do want to share is that, you know, take this moment to talk about, you know, just experience as a Muslim. And then I think Mariam and Hajar can do an excellent job talking about experience from, you know, being Arab or Arab, being Arab Americans, and being here, especially Hajar being here in the same town for a long, long time. But I think one of the things that's associated with Arab Americans and Muslims is the idea of, and I'll say it because, you know, I'm the religious director here, is the concept of jihad, right? The concept of terrorism, the concept of ISIS, the concept of Islamic State, concept of Sharia law or Shakira law. I don't know, I'm not a big fan of Shakira's music, but maybe other people are. But you get these kind of comments from people. And I'm going to leave it open-ended. I've mentioned those things so people feel comfortable. Just, you know, if you want to ask questions about those things, please feel free to do so. I remember the first time I was called a terrorist. You know, it was one of the first times where I thought, you know, I am the other now, right? It's I am the other. And I was like, well, what do you mean I'm the terrorist? And it really, you know, it was like, what's going on here? I didn't really register because you're just living your life, you're being an American. The first time I got called a terrorist was when I was 9 years old.
Wow.
Right. So I shared this story to say that, you know, it wasn't that, you know, second grader or third grader or whatever that who was, you know, holding these biases, but they're clearly, he was conditioned to them one way or another. And similarly, I think we're conditioned with certain biases. I think everybody has biases. When the Christchurch shooting happened in New Zealand, if you're not familiar with it, please do familiarize yourself with it, where, you know, a radical right-wing anti-immigrant fanatic terrorist, he actually shot up a mosque and killed 50 people while they were praying. And here I see some head nods. Quite a tragic event. When that happened, you know, that was right before our Friday sermon, right? The Friday prayer. And so as an imam, which is similar to a pastor giving a sermon on Friday, you know, it happened at a time where at 2 a.m. is when I found out. So you're struggling, you're figuring out, what do I do? What do I say? How do I not galvanize, but how do I provide healing? And many people here, like from other, you know, faith groups will recognize that. And so I'm trying to figure out what to say and what do I talk about, and, you know, contacting people who might be aware of the situation. And so you don't get much sleep. And before I even get to the mosque, right when I get to the mosque, we see, you know, 3 sets of flowers that have been given to us by our neighbors. And that there's a card, and it says something to the effect of, you have always shown us a love, and we want to show that love back to you. And it really shows you that, and our neighbors are not, you know, Muslims. They might not even be Arabs, or they might not even, maybe they've never stepped foot inside the mosque, but they had this kind of experience, and they had this kind of joy, and they had this kind of sense of community and camaraderie that I think we're sharing here today. And the one thing that I'll end with, the reason I bring that up, is one of the things that was mentioned during those conversations when Christchurch was happening, or before COVID. Every 4 years, there would be conversations on immigration, on Arabs, on Muslims, every 4 years. But I think COVID was a little bit more serious of a matter. I want to talk about it this year. And whenever this would happen, people would always reply back with saying, no, Arabs are good people, Muslims are good people, right? And I would sometimes have to say that, even though I'm not an Arab, people are expecting that because they think I'm Arab. Muslims are great people, Muslims are fantastic, they're great Americans. And I'm scratching to my head and I'm thinking, Muslims are not the greatest of people. There's Muslims who are just not good at math. There are Muslims who are great at engineering. There's Muslims who are good at being your neighbors. There are Muslims who you're going to be annoyed with. There are Muslims who cook really well. There's Muslims who cook not that well, right? The Muslims are just like me and you, which means they have the same issues and problems. Arabs are going to be like me and you, that they're not going to be the best of people. They're not going to be the worst of people. They're going to be people just like me and you, trying to figure out COVID and how to work while your kids are at school, while trying to figure out meetings, while the home is a mess, right? That's really what I want to, start the conversation with, that we kind of unlearn certain things that we have and really try to just look at the other person as, yeah, they're regular people, and not in a reaction kind of overpraise people behind their positions, right? If you go around saying imams are the best people in the world, and then you see me well, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you, you know? Similarly, I know I'm being facetious here, but that concept is true. And I really hope that I open some kind of, kind of light bulbs in people's minds and kind of feel comfortable to talk about certain things that might be problematic, and really take this a moment to just talk, have a conversation, and take it from there. So thank you again. I know it went on a little bit long, but thank you again for allowing me to speak in the beginning.
All right. No, thank you for sharing. And so I don't know if either Haj or Miriam, if you have, I don't know, a similar experience that you're able to share. We're talking about, the experiences that you had in the United States, as far as what Safwan shared about what happened when he was 9 years old. Either of you had that experience here as well?
Well, I can speak from, a Syrian who is an immigrant coming to the US, and I think Hajar would have, a different experience and perspective. I did encounter certain, conversation with people, and I had some positive and others were negative. Some of the negative ones, I was driving my car, an older lady, I don't know why she, got that urge to open her window and tell me I have to go back to India. I never been in India. I don't know what's going on in India, and I don't know why she wanted me to go back to India. Other incidents where I'm like walking in the mall, people approach me asking me, where am I from? And I would say, I'm Syrian. It was like, oh no, you do not look Arab. Oh, are you Russian? Are you, no, your accent is Polish. Like, even though I have a very thick Syrian accent, I don't know why, because I have a lighter skin, a light eye colors. And yeah, so it is conflicting, but it's, for me, it's funny. And most of the time when I tell people I am Arab, they feel like I'm insulting myself, and they have to tell me, no, I do not look like Arab. And no, you're so beautiful. You do not look Arab. I was like, who said Arabs are not beautiful? Like, why? I'm still like Arab, to a point that I had to do a DNA test to show people that I am 100% Syrian Arab. When they are.
All right, thank you.
For me personally, I don't know. I feel like when I tell my experiences to like my other Muslim friends, they call me lucky because I haven't experienced like the so-called terrorist claims at a young age. I think for me, growing up in Simsbury, I would say I was lucky because I did grow up in like a smaller elementary school, so everyone knew who I was and what I did, and like we all were very close. But when I went into middle school and like high school, the struggles just became, I had to show people like what I believe in, bring in like the Quran, bring in books, and just be like, hey guys, this isn't a big issue. I believe in the same things you guys believe in, just in another kind of concept. And I just remember off the top of my head when I was going to the Simsbury High School orientation, one of the principals says, okay, or one of the dress code is no hats allowed. And I wrote my college essay about this. Everyone turned to look at me, and this was like 400 people, and I'm like, I just felt so awkward. I just remember that off the top of my head. Like, thankfully I was never called a terrorist. And like growing up, I mean, my mom has, my brother has. I've been blamed for experiences when I remember also when President Trump became president, someone was telling me and my friends, oh, you're going to go back to your country. And I reported the incident, and I was told that I was at fault because of how outspoken I was.
Oh boy.
And I was like, oh, okay. I don't know. It's like a back and forth thing. I've come to realize that this little world isn't perfect, and I've accepted what I've gone through, and it just makes me who I am today, and why I'm going into law, especially. Like, one of the reasons was because of what happened in my high school orientation.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. David, you got your hand up? You're on mute.
Yeah, okay. Salwan, thank you for sharing. I had the absolute pleasure of living 6 years in Iran and 6 years in Saudi Arabia. The hospitality and the welcoming that I got from the beauty of Islam. So when you talk, yes, there are Christians also who blow up buildings. So we can't talk about that. So my experiences have just been one. I miss being there, you know, in both countries. One was Shiite, okay, which is Iran, and one was Sunni, which is Saudi. And in time, I'm sorry, I do have another. I teach at Nantucket Community College. I have a college Zoom at 7:30 or 6 or 7 o'clock. So, but in time, I'm hoping, inshallah, if God wills, that the Sunnis and the Shiites come together. And really, because there's a thing between the two of them, only a few around, but that they come, it's like the Catholics and the Protestants. And I'm just really hoping that they find a way to see, you know, because of the history, but they have everything else in common. I mean, the commonality that I saw in Iran and in Saudi in terms of the hospitality was just awesome. And so I just, and the food, the people, everything. So that's, I just wanted to, Salwan, I wanted to add to what you had said. Thank you so much for letting me speak, Nikosi.
Well, I think perhaps that could be a segue into a next question, though. When you talk about, you know, Saudi Arabia and Iran, you know, the Sunni versus the Shiite, and I know it's an abbreviated discussion, Safwan, or either if anyone could help, maybe just give a little what's the difference, you know, when we talk about the Sunni versus Shiite?
Sure. So I think I can speak on it from more the theological lens, and then I think Mariam Haji can speak it from more the experience sociological level. There is, I mean, to say that there are completely no differences will be, you know, belittling the two groups, right? There are clear differences that people hold on to in their belief systems, and I don't want to come here and say that, you know, there are no differences, because that might belittle somebody's beliefs, right? But the beliefs go back, the differences in beliefs goes back to the Prophet Muhammad, right? Sunnis and Shias both believe in the Prophet Muhammad. They believe he's the last messenger. But the question comes, who is fit to lead after Prophet Muhammad, right? You know, this happens in this is a phenomenon in any religion, authority, governments, whatever. You have a charismatic leader. When that charismatic leader passes on or something happens, a demise of him, the leadership that comes after becomes more crucial than the originator of the actual civilization. And that's why most civilizations, they actually peak, not because of their founder, but because of the ones who come afterwards. And so there is a lot of difference of opinion between Sunnis and Shias regarding this authority. Who does the authority go to after Prophet Muhammad, which has practical differences, right? In terms of how, you know, Sunnis and Shias do marriage contracts. There's differences there. In terms of how Sunnis and Shias might do almsgiving, zakat, which is humus, as they call it, right? A fifth, that's also a difference. But where do you find commonalities, again and again, I keep stressing this, is those norms that I think that generally is a, you know, an Islamic principle, which is hospitality, but which Islam actually affirmed, which is already Arab hospitality, right? We know the Prophet Muhammad, he said there are certain things that before Islam that the Arabs used to do that were just profound, we're just gonna keep on doing them, right? And one of them was hospitality. And so you'll find that in any Muslim country that you go to, or any country that has Muslims, or any area that you have Muslims, especially in the Arab country, it's quite phenomenal. I was born in Saudi Arabia, actually, came here at a young age, even though I'm originally Pakistani, and it's just something that's a, you know, it has toxic is not the right word, but it really rubs off on every single person until you start, you know, every neighbor that comes, you start feeding them and feeding them and feeding them and feeding them, and you realize you're that person now. So there are clearly differences when it comes to Sunnis and Shias, and I don't want to belittle that completely. But at the same time, when it comes to a person-person basis, when somebody's your neighbor and whatnot, a lot of the conflicts that you see today, a lot of that doesn't really go back to a person's belief and conviction in God and authority 1440 years ago. A lot of that has to do with politics, rule, governance, a minority ruling a majority, things of that nature. And that's where it really gets into it, where politics become the real issue. And sometimes religion is used to justify many, many things. And that's something we're all familiar with.
All right. All right. And perhaps, yeah, going to you, Miriam, if you wish to add on to that.
Yeah, I do agree with Brother Sufyan, what he said. I would also add, like, even those differences that he mentioned, those are differences based on the interpretations of the Quran and the prophets saying the hadiths, which is also included within the Sunni. For examples, we have the different school of thoughts. We have the Shafi'i school of thought. We have the Hanafi school of thought, which also there are those differences between the interpretations. But the main, it's not a conflict. The main difference between the Sunni in general and the Shia is more or less in the politic aspect of the religion. So Shias believe that the authority should be religious and political. Sunnis believe that the religious authority can be separated from the political authority.
All right. Haj, do you have anything you wish to add with
No,
that?
I think Mariam and Safwan had everything spot on.
Okay.
One thing I'll say is just the numbers. So about, last number I saw is about 85% of the world Muslim population is Sunni. And then you have about 10% or so, or less, maybe less than 10% that are Shi'i. And then you have 4 and 5% that are different sects of Islam. Most mosques that you go to in Connecticut are going to be Sunni mosques. And then there are larger communities of Shias in bigger cities, and all in Dearborn, Michigan, for example, has a large Shia community. But most of the time, if you talk to a Muslim, he may be from Sunnism. And also one thing is not to, differences in different religions. You can't copy and paste that and say, well, this is the same thing as the differences in my religion, right? And to kind of say, oh, this is the same thing as, Reformation, or same thing as Protestantism and Catholicism is quite different in other ways. But that's just the numbers and data for you guys.
Just
And-
remembered when you said that, I'm sorry.
Oh, go
When you
ahead.
said the numbers. So it is because the word Sunni, it came like way after, the formation, the message was sent and the Islam came, and it's to call all the others Muslims who are not Shia. Like the word Shia, it's like the small branch of the majority of Muslims. We call them like the Shia. It's called, that's why we have like the majority are called Sunni, but it's not really a term. It's more to differentiate between the two groups.
Okay. Nice. And I guess that speaks to you're speaking the difference a little bit with the Sunni and the Shiite. I guess I'll just ask also within perhaps in the Arab countries in the Middle East, how much of a role, I guess we could ask, would you find with Christianity, as well?
Can you repeat the question?
As what is there a Christian mix as well? Like it's in your country in Syria, I know if I've read my New Testament, there'll be the road to Damascus and such is a big, a big part of the book of Acts. But how's that interaction, I guess, perhaps, at home?
So before the revolution, when I was there, being Sunni, Shia, Christian, and any other religion has nothing to do with, being a part of a conversation or being a neighbor. So individuals let's say in my building, we had a Christian's neighbors. We had like politics would play much bigger role in our life and differentiate than the religion. We do not really speak of a religion or sects in our daily life. My name is Miriam, the Virgin Mary. The Arabic name for it is Maryam, and I was planning to call my son Isa, which is Jesus' name in Arabic, if he was born in December, but he came in January 10th, so I did not call him Isa. In Syria, we still have we do regular visits to certain towns that they still speak Aramaic. It's like the official language of the towns. Aramaic is the Jesus language. There is no, any conflict or problems of being from different religion because we're used to it. That's speaking for Syria before the war, before the government or any the outsider came and tried to create those issues that we are facing now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Another question we have here is that the holy month of Ramadan is coming up, starting in, I guess, what, four days. And maybe if you could help us, as far as how do you celebrate? Why do you celebrate? What is the importance of the month of Ramadan?
Audrey, you can take this one.
It's fun. I was going to pass this on to you.
It's because I'm wearing a hat. That's what it is. So Ramadan is a 30-day journey. Really, that's how I look at it. And celebration is an interesting word, but if you ask somebody on the 15th day of Ramadan, how are you celebrating? They're gonna be like, oh my gosh, that's not, oh my gosh, stop it. Ramadan is fasting from sunrise to sunset. In the 30 days or 29 days of the holy month of Ramadan. It is holy not because of the fasting, but because Muslims believe that God started the communication and relationship with Prophet Muhammad in the month of Ramadan. And that relationship was codified or canonified in the Quran, the holy book, the Quran. And so that really becomes the purpose of Ramadan. And so the fasting aspect of it is a means to get closer to God. Right. And I think many religions, not just Abrahamic religions, have a concept of fasting and giving up something. Fasting literally means sum, to refrain from things. And so we refrain from drinking, eating, not even water. No, not even water. That's like an inside joke between Muslims, because whenever you tell a non-Muslim, hey, I'm fasting from eating and drinking, the first question we always get is ... not even water, ? So that's like a meme that goes on the internet now. And that's what it's really about. It's a spiritual journey. It's tiring. It's not easy. So if you have colleagues, they might get a little annoyed quicker. I used to always do that. I used to work in IT, so I used to tell people like, hey, get a little annoyed, a little extra. It's because I'm fasting. And maybe he thought Ramadan was kind of hard, but it's you got to be truthful to yourself. And that's really the legal aspects of it in terms of law. I think I want to have Maryam and Hajar talk more about like social activities and other things that people do. In America, at least in this country.
Right. Yeah. Haj, you wish to share?
Yeah, sure. So for right now, I know my mom is downstairs decorating the entire house with Ramadan decor and like lights and everything that you can think of. I'm like, and I always tell them like, Mama, what are you doing? Like, we're not children, but she's like, it's the joy of it. And it's like being back home. I know she always tells me stories, my mom, my stepmother, my father, of how in the streets of where they grew up, they would have lights on this from one balcony to the end. And it reminds us of just Christmas lights and how the streets are filled with colorful lights and celebrations of it. I mean, other than that, we'll have like gatherings with our friends and our families. I mean, before Corona, I don't know how things are going to work this year, but maybe if we're vaccinated, we'll all gather together. Yeah, pretty much it. I think Safwan can also talk about what we do at the mosque, but
Actually, I want to hear from Maryam and make us feel jealous about how Muslim countries spend Ramadan, because for Muslims living in the West, there's not much of a season. Ramadan's a season. Christmas is a season, but Christmas is 1 or 2 days, right? Christmas Eve. Now imagine 30 days. And then imagine that Muslim hospitality. So my mom, just like Hajar said, shares stories about what happens in Muslim months, and many parents actually take their kids to, quote unquote, back home for people who are immigrants, and just experience Ramadan. And it's just so Maryam, please, I want to hear. I'm asking you a question, and please, I want to hear your experience with Ramadan.
I want to go back to your first statement that you started with, the word jihad. So I always thought, fasting is a form of jihad, right? You are refraining from eating, drinking for the whole day since I was a child. But I did not know what the word jihad mean until I came here and I fasted here. So where I felt the real struggle, of being Muslim, fasting in a place where everybody else is eating and nobody, looking forward for that Maghrib Adhan where, the sunset and nobody's looking at the watch. There is not that excitement that we're going to be eating right now. It's completely different experience. Like the experience of Ramadan, it's different from tradition to tradition, from culture to other. Like even within the Arab world, there is, the decoration Hajar talked about. For Muslims in Syria, we have a lot of Christians who do the Christmas lighting and stuff. For us as Muslims, we do not really do the decorations, but the food and the feasts, if you may call it, in every masjid there is always a whole feast that feed about at least 100 people. So whomever is late at work, cannot make it at home to eat, they can stop at any masjid and eat like the best food. There are some special dishes for the Ramadan, and also this is a traditional culture. It's not very, like, it's not something that in our religion, it's more in our culture. But yeah, the difference is that when you are fasting and or any other religious worshiping or obligation that you do, when you are doing it in a group, in like a neighborhood where everybody is Muslim, it's completely different experience when you are doing it by yourself, and nobody else sharing this excitement with you. Did I answer your question, Safwan, or
No,
not?
you did. One thing I'll add on is that even though Muslims fast in Ramadan, many Muslims actually gain weight.
Oh
Because
yeah,
when sunset happens, it's like revenge for all the oppression that they suffered in the daytime. And they
I
just,
actually every Ramadan I gain 3 kilos.
yeah,
Every single Ramadan I gain 3 kilos, which is about like what, 7 pounds.
yeah.
And then I have to work the whole year round to put them down for the next Ramadan to give them again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we
I think I'm the only one that loses weight in Ramadan.
because you're doing it the right way.
Yeah, you're doing the right way.
So how does that, work? I know as you're here in the States and obviously outside of COVID, but how does that like work with the fellowship, and just like, to the togetherness, and just in regards to Muslim, communities while you're here in the United States? Is this a time, of fellowship, a time of togetherness while you're here? Is there an extended community that you reach out to that that becomes a little bit smaller at a time such as this?
As for me, that's why I do what I'm doing right now at Trinity College. Being the program coordinator for Muslim life on campus is giving me the opportunity to provide to the students that I did not have as a student when I was at Trinity. So now we are holding a everyday iftar and suhoor for our students. In a way, because of COVID, there's guidelines. We have, the social distancing restrictions that we cannot do, but we still have, the coffee and tea cart at the Muslim prayer room. We have like the special made iftar and special made suhoor, so students feel home. And we have, from different cuisines provided for international students, to feel like they are actually, like, if it's not, doesn't feel like they are home, but it's closer to home than nothing. So that's why I love what I do.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have any questions that they wish to ask at this time? Okay, Nicole, I see you have your hand up.
So if it's a season and a month and it's about drawing closer to God, are there focus areas? Like a lot of times in the Christian tradition, we'll have a focus area during Lent, for example, that helps us focus on something. So you're not just fasting from something, but to something. So does Ramadan sometimes have programming that will help you focus to acts of service, hospitality practices, learning some of the Quran, or are there any things that help you fast too?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of 3 things on the top of my head. Number one is that every night during Ramadan, there are nightly prayers. And they can be long, but people can leave whenever they want. And they really become a way of engaging your soul during the nighttime. That's really a kind of progress. And usually you'll have people kind of, as Ramadan goes, you'll have more people coming, less people coming, but towards the last 10 nights, the last 10 nights of Ramadan are the special nights, right? So the first 20 days, you're getting used to it. I actually advise people to take it easy. Don't try to do all the good deeds in the world. Don't do that. Just take it easy, right? Your body is going to get used to it. And the last 10 nights, you kind of try to do as much as you can. And then within the last 10 nights, there's one night, which can happen any night. We don't know what night it is, where Muslims we believe that the angel Gabriel descends down. And what that means is that descends down, i.e. his power, and also God's mercy descends down. And this was actually the same night where the Quran was revealed. So it's a powerful, significant night. And in this night, if somebody was to pray, or somebody was to worship, or somebody was to give a donation, or somebody was to say hi, it will be multiplied to infinity, right? It's like technically 80 years, 83 years or something like that, but it's an Arabic phrase for saying infinity over and over and over again. So that kind of becomes like these little milestones as you go to kind of keep you engaged and kind of keep you focused on what the mission is about, right? What the objective is about is to get closer to God. And these things are helping you. That's why most people actually donate during the months of Ramadan. A lot of Muslim organizations or relief support groups, they make their appeals in Ramadan. Fundraisers are huge in Ramadan, right? It's just part of the culture, especially in the West, where most mosques are supported by communities, because people want to really make sure that they're, reaping up all that they're sowing in this month. So I think if that's kind of answers your question about having those kind of milestones throughout Ramadan.
Okay. Is anyone else? Annalise, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so I always bring up the fact that I'm a teacher, but I'm thinking about my students who are Muslim and they're about to enter this great time in practice. And I'm wondering, what can I do as a teacher to let them know that I'm celebrating with them, or that I know that they're going through something that's special to them. How do I acknowledge it? How do I make them know that, I'm there with them?
Well, first you can tell them that Ramadan Mubarak, may have a blessed Ramadan.
Can you
And
say that again?
Ramadan Mubarak, which is literally mean blessed Ramadan.
Okay.
And the other thing is, I don't know if you are, teaching in person or virtually, but either way, if somebody's fasting, it means the world to them if somebody refrain from eating in front of them. So it makes them feel like really special here in the US, when I know that you can eat, but you're not eating because I'm fasting. So that's, I think, would be the greatest. And just going and like letting them know that you can, that they are fasting, they are, they're gonna be like a zombie, during the day because they are not eating. So just cutting slack would be great. That's what I can think. I don't know, Haja.
Yeah, also I think like a big thing is also giving them a safe space during lunchtime. Like for me, I remember like, and for people with other school districts, we would hide in the bathroom during lunch because we didn't have anywhere else to go and we didn't want to sit and watch other people eat. And I know like for my brother last year, or the year before, he would sit with his classmates at the cafeteria and just watch them eat, and they would just like kind of like nudge them, be like, hey, here's some food, no one's gonna watch, like giving them a brief lesson. Like I remember in my sophomore year of high school, I gave them like a brief lesson of what I'm doing and how everything is going to work, and I'm going to be like a little cranky, so don't mind the attitude, because like a lot of people in Ramadan, like we barely sleep, like we don't catch up on sleep until like the day of Eid, like which is one of our holidays. We have a daily Eid nap after prayer where we sleep and then we just party at night. So I just think remembering that and just giving them a safe space and an open space and allowing them to be comfortable and come towards you and come. Yeah. And also you can just say happy Ramadan instead of Ramadan Mubarak.
Annalise, if that's your name, if I'm saying it right. But if you want to get challenged, what you could do is you could go to your doctor and say, doctor, is it okay if I fast from sunrise to sunset? Because I want to show solidarity with my students. And if you feel comfortable to it, I know many teachers, and many even in college, many of my friends, not Muslim obviously, and they actually fasted with us, and they lasted until like an hour or two before sunset. But the idea that they tried really was by far the most amazing thing that they've done. And even some of them didn't even actually fast. I mean, they just like, yeah, I'm just not gonna eat. And even that was just, okay, this person is really but not everybody can do that. I know I'm not trying to put anybody in shame or anything like that, but just in general, that's something that really helps. But no, it's not something I recommend everybody, but something does help and feel good as a Muslim.
I think this is a great idea, not just to support the students, it's also for you to know what they are going through while they are fasting. So if you want to know what the students feeling and how, frankly, as Hajar said, they would be, doing it yourself would help you understand the students more.
Nicole, you got your hand up
I'm gonna
again?
do that.
Cool. With the fasting and the doctor, it makes me think, what age do Muslims tend to start? I mean, young children probably, do they fast as well during Ramadan?
My younger brother, who's 5, he does this funny thing where he'll wake up, he'll eat, he'll say he's fasting for 2 hours, eat again, and then fast again for a couple hours, like, and then eat again 5 minutes before we're supposed to eat and just say, hey, guys, I fasted. So I think it depends on the age. Usually, like, our parents tell us when we reach the age of puberty, we start fasting, but I know my brother started fasting way before that, but then I started way later than that because I wasn't prepped for it.
My son used to brag of how a better Muslim he is than my mother, his grandmother. So he always tell her, you fast 1 time a day, I fast 5 times a day. Like I eat and fast and then eat and fast. You only do it once. But in Islam, that to be a religiously responsible person, once you hit puberty, you are spiritually and religiously obligated to perform like the fasting, the prayers, and everything else. Of course, there are many exceptions. Sufwan can talk about. If you are, sick, you cannot fast. If you are traveling, you do not have to fast. So there are some exceptions and exclusions depending on the situation. So it's not a firm mandatory obligation to do. There are certain. That's why even if I am a Muslim, my doctor told me you cannot fast. I cannot fast. That's why when Sufyan said, "Ask your doctor." Sophia, I'm going to add more. I don't know if I missed anything.
No, you covered it. Really, it becomes it's actually frowned upon to fast if you're not supposed to, right? And that's something that we always encourage people. Like, hey, it's the objective is obeying and loving God and following Him. And if He's saying, hey, don't fast, then you're also get to eat and you're also getting a reward. So it's like a double win-win.
I was going to ask if especially young people find other conflicts with practicing during Ramadan, whether it's, being home for breaking the fast, or even celebrating Eid. Like, I know that date isn't generally included in the school calendar. How do families navigate those religious obligations?
For my son, I always sent the school a letter that he will be missing the day of Eid, at least the first. So the Eid is 3 days, it's not 1 day. But because we are here in the US and there's no such a holiday for it and schools are in session, I do inform the teachers that he will be missing the school for religious reasons, which I explain what the Eid is, and we do it. But there's something that should be done for that, and I think we should start, sooner than later to ask for an actual like the state would have an official holiday, at least for the rights that we have.
Would 1 day be enough, or would it really, like, should the request be for 3 days, like, to actually acknowledge the whole holiday? Or I don't know.
In Islam, we have only two celebrations, which are the Eids. This is one of them, the one after the fasting, and the other is after the Hajj, the pilgrimage. And that one is 3 days and the other is 4 days. But starting with 1 day for each as an official holiday would be great. And then after a few years, we can add the other days.
And then we can make up holidays as we go and get more days off.
I would love that, yeah.
I guess, when you bring up the Hajj, and that's I guess one of the primary tenets of Islam, is that something that you've all partaken in? Is that that you've done, or have you not done that before?
No, so I haven't done it. I think Mariam's also shaking her head. Hajar, if you've done it, I'll be impressed.
I've done Umrah.
Yeah, so there's a major pilgrimage and minor pilgrimage. Minor pilgrimage can happen anytime. It's quite light. It's not too taxing. Major pilgrimage is the big one. It's the one that you see on the textbook or a pamphlet of Islam. You see all those people praying to the black cube, which is not, we don't pray to it. It's just a way to orient your prayer, to direct yourself towards God. Um, yeah, it happens every single year. During COVID, it even happened, but it was only restricted to people who were in the town, because it always does happen. It's something that is a sight to behold, from what I'm told, and there's a lot of details to it. But the legal aspect of it, or the religious aspect of it, is that anybody who is able to do so, and usually that means health-wise, but also means money-wise, because financially it's a lot of money. A ticket from America, if you wanted to go and have a decent journey, will cost you $10,000 per person, right? Which is significant. So if you have a family of your son maybe is 19, 18, you want to get him, he's a little bit older, that's $30,000, right? You, your spouse. And that's only if you're able to do so. If you're not able to do so, then there's no expectation that you have to do that. You'll find of all people sometimes go when they're really young. Most people, you'll find them that go towards in middle age. You'll find them because now they're stable, they have money. Kids a little bit older, they don't need to get babysat, and then they go for the Hajj, which is the major pilgrimage.
Yeah, so as you said, the pillars of Islam, the Hajj is one of them, one of the five. So we have the prayers, the zakat, the fasting, Ramadan, and then the pilgrimage. The pilgrimage is the only obligation that God said, if you can. And it's an obligation to the people who can. So if you are financially able, if you are, health-wise or able to perform the obligation, you have to do it. But if you do not, you do. I mean, there is no enforcement for it.
Okay. And that occurs, the Hajj, occurs in February? Is that a set time for that?
No, we wish it was in February. Right now, it's based on a lunar calendar. So for anybody who's, I don't know if anybody is Jewish here, but a lunar calendar, right, there you go. So a lunar calendar is based off the lunar cycle, which changes and doesn't correspond exactly to the monthly cycle that we have today, or yearly cycle that we have today. So it changes every year about, I don't know, what is it, 16 days? I think every year it goes back 16 days. I think is that what it is? So if Ramadan this year was in April 16th, or 3 days, I want to say 3 days.
Yeah, it's much less, I think.
Much less, yeah, I don't know. I'm confusing myself. But if Ramadan starts on April 13th this year, next year will probably start April 11th, 10th. So eventually it keeps going back and back. Right now, Hajj is in July, right? June? July.
17th.
So it's right in the heat. So I think I'm gonna wait till it goes to February, January, and go then.
Okay. Annalise, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I guess you can ignore my question on the chat, because I'm just gonna ask. I'd like to think that we're all aware of them, the aggressions that happen on a day-to-day. But I'm wondering, microaggressions, like what kinds of things happen around you all the time that you wish we would be more aware of, that non, Arab or Muslim people would be more aware of. Like sometimes, I'm startled that something's against a woman, and here I am, I've been a woman for a long time, So I'm just wondering, what can you shed some light on?
I can say one thing that really, really bothers me, and it's a microaggression, and it's also part of, I believe that it's like a bigger propaganda against Islam, is whenever a Muslim does something, we always identify that person with their religion. While if anybody else did anything, if they are non-Muslims, they are either, identified with their social status or other status that they have. And even when talking to me and people introducing me, always they introduce me, or my friend, the Muslim. It's like, I'm proud of being Muslim, and I would accept it, and I will be happy to be introduced as a Muslim if you do that with everybody else. But you only use my religion to identify me, and I do not know your religion. yourself. So that's one thing that it might not bother other people, but for me personally, it does bother me, that me being identified much differently than others. Like, not because I do not want to be identified as Muslim, but because it's different from everybody else. Like, I don't know anybody else religion, but everybody now, know them, the Muslim Miriam.
I guess, do you thinking, how do I want to say this, that your religion, I guess when you say being identified as Muslim, I guess from my eyes, from my perspective, that being Muslim, it identifies you in a lot of ways, necessarily where you could be Christian and you'll never tell anybody, nobody will ever know, there's nothing that you do, necessarily that could let anyone know that you're Christian. So in that sense, it's difficult. People might not go through prayer, people might not go through fasting. There's a whole bunch of well, I think you said, oh, you could just eat a little bit, nobody's watching type of deal, and so I guess in that sense, as defining, you, I guess that's what I'm thinking, when I'm asking this, like, it's how much does it define you?
I think a lot of it actually, as many people in America can comment on, and also a lot of it has to do with the pigmentation of your skin. So if you are, darker in color, if your complexion is browner or darker, then, even if you are Christian and you're from an Arab, country, like Egypt, or for example, or you have, a beard like mine, right? I may be able to think I'm Egyptian or Palestinian, even though I'm from Pakistan, which is not an Arab country. A lot of people, and if it's versus somebody who might be a little lighter on the skin color, might have blue eyes, it may not be wearing a hijab, or may not have a beard or hat like me, stand out as a Muslim. So they might be able to, if you want to use the word assimilate, I don't know if that's the right word. I think assimilation can be in different forms, but you'd be able to kind of not be subject to a certain type of treatment that other people would be. And, going back to microaggressions, one thing that I always keep in mind, because that's the position that I'm in, is that, one of the things that I don't want to get away from is one of the important things in Islam is the intention of a person. Who are you sincerely towards God is very important. And so if somebody does something that's aggressive or lightly aggressive, I really have to check and say, is this malintent? Or is this somebody who doesn't know what they're doing? Because if I was the person who didn't know and I said something dumb and stupid, which happens quite often because I speak too much and I speak too fast, I wouldn't want the other person to think that I mean something bad. I just didn't know, right? Whatever, maybe. And we've all been in that situation, regardless of your background. You've all said something to somebody and you're like, wait a minute, was that racist? wait, I'm not racist. And then you say something more to put your foot in your mouth, right? Oh no, I have a black friend. You're like, oh my gosh, no, don't say that. You know what I mean? It happens. These are things, and that's where you have to kind of, in my position, I'm not saying for everybody. I think in some situations you have to just call it out as it is. But in my position, being a kind of a leader in our community, I have to be like, hey, this is not malintent. This is something trying to learn, somebody trying to do it. And they see me as a Muslim first. And so let's unpack that. But that's because I'm an imam. That's because I'm serving quote unquote as a pastor, which is an imam. That's not really, you don't expect that from people who are going to high school, right? You don't expect them to talk on the behalf of religion just because they, go to school and they look different, especially for, you have women here who are wearing the hijab in a certain way. You don't expect that to be spokesperson for an entire people of 1.5 billion. And on top of that, also be spokesperson for Arabs, which are just, now you're adding on the Christian and Jewish and agnostic and atheist population as well. So that kind of pressure, you really can't expect to put on people who didn't sign up for that position, right? And so that's something I think, as a conversation that I think Muslims need to have internally as well, within their hierarchy of positions and whatnot. And it's something that's great that you brought up, because from the other side, it's like, people do identify, and that's how we identify people as they are. So where is that bridge between, hey, aggressive versus I have malintent? And that's, I think, a good conversation to have amongst ourselves, regardless of who you're talking to or what topic you're talking about, whether it's this or any other kinds of social justice issues.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. Being the perspective of, being a representative, being the ambassador, even, whether you want it or not, is an issue. But also what I like, the thing that bothers me the most, talking about microaggression, this is another way to marginalize the Muslims more, by identifying them differently. So again, we identify like every woman in this cycle, whether she's a single or a married woman, except you are Muslim. So this is for us telling you are an outsider in a very subtle, passive way. That's what I meant by being, basically it's a discrimination, but a passive, micro one.
I just want to apologize. I just have to break because I'm at the mosque. I just have to break for sunset prayers. So I'll be back, I want to say in 10 minutes, but I'll probably be back in 5 minutes. And
Right.
the Muslims are laughing. They know why. Excuse me.
Keep us in your prayer. All right. Well, I guess perhaps we could use that as also as a segue, because we were talking a little bit about the hijab. And so, with you, with Hajj and Miriam, what is the practice of covering your hair? And I guess in some places it even goes to a covering of the face. Is that, can you expound on that a little bit to give us a little bit of understanding on that practice? Yeah, Hajj, either one. Hajj, you can start, whoever.
Mariam, you can go and I'll go after.
I promise you go after.
I will.
Okay. So the word hijab is an Arabic word. The English word for it is cover, literally means cover. And it is an obligation to cover your body for female and male. It's not, the word hijab, it's not a word for, or a term for a female to cover her hair. It's in the Quran, God asked men and women to be modest, to cover their awrat, which is the that places in your body that you're not supposed to be exposing to others. And there are like different levels of the hijab, or different levels of the cover. For example, when I am at home, there are certain people that I do not cover my hair, but I have to cover my whole body. Other people, I only cover from, my waist to down. It depends on, the relatives or the relationship between you and the other people. And it is also a misconception that women are obligated to do hijab, but men are not. In fact, it's in the ayah, it was God mentioned men first to be modest and lower their gaze, and then ordered women to cover themselves and lower their gazes too. It is an obligation like any other obligation. Like I was ordered to fast, to pray, and to cover myself, modesty. Hajar?
Yeah, so like the word hijab, like Mariam said, it does mean covering up, but a lot of people have their own interpretation of what it means and what it means to cover up and what you should cover up. Just like I'm just going off of what Mariam said, like some people will just cover their hair, and then, or some, like my mom, for example, she'll wear like an abaya, which is just a whole dress, where she'll cover her entire body. But I won't do that because I just haven't gotten to that point in my life, and nor do I ever think I will. But I just think, I don't know how to explain it because Mariam kind of hit everything that I wanted to say. It's like the hijab just represents like a set of codes of modesty, privacy, and like your actions of what it means. Like for me, like being not wearing a hijab doesn't only mean to cover my hair, but it means of how I represent myself to other people, and how I hold myself, because I'm not only representing me, representing myself, I'm representing my religion. So I think a lot of people have that, like, yes, it's just not it's not a thing that I'm just covering my hair. I'm doing something as a whole to show you guys that I am Muslim and that I am doing something for God. Like for me, I've been wearing my scarf for, I think, 13 years. Yeah, I just hit 13 years, like I think a couple months ago, which it's been a struggle, of course, but like I went against my parents and my entire family for wearing it because, I mean, in all honesty, I didn't want to, I put it on because I didn't want to brush my hair, go in the morning for school. But it's become such a journey where it's become it's become something that I have to do. It's like a routine, like going to the gym. It's like, I can't go somewhere without putting my scarf on. It's an example of like my best friend. I love it.
It is part of you.
Yeah.
One thing it's also worth to mention is it is an obligation and nobody forces us to do it. So another um, incident that happened to me, actually not one incident, multiple times when I am out, a lot of people tell me, oh, you are in the US, you can take it off. This is, the country of freedom. And other times I was asked that if, did your husband force you to put it? Actually, my husband, when we were back in Syria, he lived here. And when he went to Syria, we met each other and got married. Before we come here, he told me, can you please take the hijab off and put a hat instead? Because it was right after the 9/11, and he told me there was like a huge attacks against Muslims, and I don't want you to be harmed. I just want you, just put a hat, keep covering your hair, but put a hat instead of the hijab. He doesn't want me to be, noticeably Muslim. And I was like, I worship the same God, it doesn't matter what the country I am in. So it is my decision to cover my hair. It's not the man or the Muslim man decision to cover. And if I was forced by a man, I am not getting the good deeds, because again, in Islam, everything about the intentions. And if you do not, then believe in what you're doing, you're not going to be rewarded for it. That's why you cannot force anyone to perform the prayers or to fast. Similarly, to put the hijab on. As for the covering, it's again, we were talking about the Shia and Sunni and like the different school of thoughts. It's matter of interpretation of the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet. That's a great example of the differences between interpretations. Some people interpret that the cover, there's one sentence in the Quran says illa ma dhahara minha, and it means except what is already shown. And some people interpret it as what is shown, it's just your height and width. Others said your face and your your hands. Others said everything else. It depends on how you interpret the ayah.
I guess I don't say I guess, part of I guess the information that we get. So if I mention, say, like Saudi Arabia and women driving, right? So we get a sense of a highly, I guess, paternal, male dominated, society. And so I don't know to what extent. So that's what I was asking. I say Saudi Arabia. Then if we were to talk about the Taliban and you see women having, I think it's called wearing like a burqa or something. So that's why I might not quite always just know that understanding. Is this, is it male dominated? What is it? Culture? Is it tradition? How much of it is, is it religious practice? And so that's kind of, why I was, asking about that.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because that's the misconception, Lee, is the culture versus the religion. So it is the Arabic culture. I cannot speak for the Afghanis, but I know for a fact, and I am, an advocate for the women's rights, and I am, a defender of a women's right. I've been attacked multiple times from my own people, like men, because I do believe that it is male-dominated culture, the Arabic culture, before the Islam and after Islam, and it has nothing to do with the Islam. That's why I mentioned the intentions and the beliefs. So even if the woman was forced to put something, neither the man who forced her or the woman will be, getting the benefits of forming that obligation. In fact, the man may, like whomever is forcing somebody, may get punished for forcing someone to do something that they did not want to do it. And I do agree with you, since we're talking about Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. As an Arab woman, I can tell you, like, yes, we have issues at the Arab countries where it is male dominated. country and the issue, and it is an issue, and we need to solve it.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that culture is completely different than what religion is. Because if we go back to the basis of Islam, Islam holds women at a very high standard. Like with Mary, Maryam, we can say alayhi salam, peace be upon her, and then the Prophet Ibrahim and Prophet Muhammad's wife and Prophet Ibrahim's wife. We hear so many stories. There are so many books. There are so many hadiths of that. These women are like the woman of Islam. Like we look up to these women. The first woman to accept Islam was Khadija, and Safwan can go more in depth about the history of women in Islam. You good, Safwan? You looking for something?
Yeah.
I'm looking for a way out.
Yeah, I think it's important because like culture does get in the way of like what we think of, like what Americans think of the Arab countries and everything. I just think it's important for all of us to do the research and just do the research. And yes, Safwan can go more in depth about the woman in Islam and like how we hold them at a high standard.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question from the audience? Nobody. Okay. So I guess thank you for sharing about that with the hijab and the cultural versus the religious component. I guess what other stereotypes do you encounter that perhaps that you how can we dispel them, or what are some of the common stereotypes that that you have experienced?
I can start with how the media portrays
Right.
our image, and which lead to for the people to stereotype us the same. So we do face stereotypes, we are profiled, and we do have that glass, ceiling glass. We're always, as Arab now talking, not Muslims specifically, but Arab in general, are either billionaires, bombers, or belly dancers. And like any movie you see, when you watch a series, like it doesn't matter how open-minded the director is, you still have to portray the Arabs, or either that sheikh who has the golden plane, the billionaires, or that woman who is a belly dancer, or that terrorist who is gonna kill you all. And of course that's horrible, and has nothing to do with the reality. Actually, the reality is the complete opposite, as we mentioned before, like the algebra, all the sciences, all the medicine inventions, all were created from the Arab world. And that's the stereotyping we're facing.
One thing that I'll add to that is that is particularly the media, and media doesn't just mean news, but it could be, as she was mentioning, movies and whatnot. There is a heavy saviors complex that exists in all throughout Hollywood when it comes to treatment of Muslims or Arabs or Americans, especially when it comes to women, right? It seems that the more American you are, that means the more free you are from religion, right? But what about moral freedom? The idea to have freedom in your moral choices. That's not really discussed that way. Or if a person wants to assimilate into American culture, he has to marry outside of his religion in order to be assimilated. I'm not saying those things are bad or good, but that's not the only way. That's the one way of looking at assimilation, which is not really assimilation. It's really, and I don't want to use this word because it's quite heavy, but it's a subtle form of colonization, which is that we are okay with representing you as long as you know and are aware that we are the ones representing you. And so there's a little bit of platforming that isn't, it's going to pull the rug under you kind of thing. That happens quite often. And if you looked at any kind of movie that you might think has a good positive image of Muslims, if you dig a little bit deeper, it'll be almost as if they're throwing, in order for them to be American, as if they're throwing away their Muslim identity or the Arab identity or the Indo-South Asian identity, whatever it may be. And when you do a deeper dive into how America was formed, Benjamin Franklin is quoted from him. he said, we want to build a state where the Mufti of the Ottomans, at the time the Ottoman Empire, to its last legs, where the Mufti of the Ottoman Empire could come and preach Muhammadan Islam to the masses, and there would be no problem with it. Thomas Jefferson, really well known, had his own Quran, had his own scripture of Quran that he would consult with. He didn't agree with everything on it, but he would consult it. We have the document in and of itself. So you kind of unravel and you realize, like, you don't have to give up your Jewish identity. You don't have to give up your ethnic identity when it comes to other religions. And similarly, you don't have to do that with your Muslim or Arab or immigrant identity. And unfortunately, what happens is, if people don't realize that, Muslims themselves start to internalize Islamophobia, where speaking with an accent and having a parent that speaks an accent is a shame for you. You don't want your parents to know that you don't want your friends to know that your parents have a thick accent, or that, you know, your mom or dad are covering, or they're wearing different clothes. Some of these are normal things, but some of it becomes internalized. And a lot of that has to do with this kind of portrayal of this savior complex. So we're going to save these battered women, number one, or these exotic women, number two, right? That's the only option you have for women. Apparently, you're either battered or they're like exotic and, you know, like they're cars or something. And they're both objectification. That's something I think you will start seeing that if you really look for it in any kind of show that represents Muslims in a kind of light.
One fun fact I would like to mention, speaking of women and Islam, is if I think some of you already know that the first university in the whole world was established by a Muslim woman. So women were having their rights like way before anybody else, you know, from other religions or other countries had their rights. Our right of education, our right of voting, our right of inheritance, all those we were granted by Islam. But again, when we are talking about the culture, it's completely different, you know, from when we are talking about the religion itself. So in Islam, the women are treated equally, morally equal to men. And the stereotyping here, like we talked about, is that I am who I am because my husband made me to do something. It's not because I am like a truly, a believer who really want to cover herself. It's somebody forced me because the norm is to be exposed. The norm is to be naked, which is not. The norm is to be who you want to be.
Nice. I just asking too, when you're talking about maybe when you internalize the Islamophobia and such, Safwan, where do you learn? I guess, you know, I'm African American, so it's a big thing of trying to learn African American history. And so what are the sources, your search to learn of more of your identification, contributions? We're talking about science, you talk about medicine and such, but if you're here, where do you go to dig up that type of information, if I may ask?
Yeah, sure. So for the Muslim side of it, that's actually, you know, it's one of those things where, like, for me, it's not really relevant to me, to be honest with you. It doesn't really matter to me if there are Muslims who contributed to the building of America or didn't, right? That's really, to me, it's like, okay, great. What if they weren't? What if Muslims in the past in American history had no input in America at all, right? That doesn't kind of take away from treatment of them as it should be treated and protected as it should be protected. And I know that's not what you're saying, but sometimes for me, that kind of, because it almost kind of puts your value in your utility, that you're only as valuable as useful you are to society, which is actually, you know, right or wrong, it's actually a type of way of political philosophy, right? You're only as good as your value is to society. But I don't think that's the way I think people look at people, right? They don't really look at that. You know, your neighbor is not, is not worth his citizenship because he cuts his lawn or he, you know, mows your lawn. He's worthy of citizenship because he's an American and he has that right. So for me, it's never been intrinsically for me to have kind of a known history of Muslims who've done great work in America or any other country. For me, really, it has been, you know, just knowing what is my religion, you know, what is my faith, because a lot of people, you know, third cultural kid, I'm a third cultural kid, right? Immigrant parents, you know, what is my culture? Am I American? Do I speak this language at home? What is my religion? What is it all about? what is religion saying, all that. And really for me, it was really a discovery of what is God, who is God, is it a white guy with a white beard, right? These are things that and I use that kind of conversation to say, like, who is he, right? Is he a statue that I worship? What are these things? Those are central questions for me in order to first figure out who I am as a person. And I think that's been my journey since then. And what I've really found to be quite useful is to just go back and, one of the things that I always tell people is, if you believe in a God, that he's all beloved and all that stuff, then just ask him. Just ask him what you want, right? And I think that's something we all share in many religions. But one thing I do wish I did more of is to know more about Pakistani Americans, because my ethnicity is from Pakistan, right? So the Muslim part of it, I'm like, okay, I'll figure it out. Just go to the books. There's a lot of sources on that. But I do wish I spoke my language a little bit better, right? When you're younger, you're like, oh, mom, I don't want to speak this at home. My friends all speak American and all that stuff. But as you get older, you're like, no, I wish I kind of retained a little bit of that language. I retain a little bit of that culture, because when I'm going to have kids, they're not going to know anything but English. I want them to be bilingual. And I think many people have that from their experience. So I really do wish there's Pakistani American contributions. And I found, to answer your question, sources actually local here. There's many Muslims from Pakistan America, from Muslims here just in general, who came to this country, came to Connecticut in the 1960s, 1967. I met a guy who was a sailor. He sailed the entire world. That's what his job was. And he came to Bridgeport in 1968. And this is when the only mosque was a Nation of Islam mosque, right? And he says now he's like, look at all these mosques that we have. And that for me was like, okay, that's my history. That is American Muslim history. I think that's where it's new for us. It's really new for us in that way. Learning about the slaves who came here and they were Muslims, right? Their journey. That was, I think, my way of looking at it. And those sources are still out there, still need to be found, still need to be discovered, because Muslim Americans are still fairly low in number. We're only 1% of the population, only 3 million out of 300 million. So we're still trying to figure out what the sources are. And we try to figure out what our roots here, which are in this country.
Okay. Anyone else wish to add to that, or? And so I guess part of the other stereotype, I'm talking about the Trump and the Muslim ban, but we spoke so much about it as in regards to terrorists. But when you ask the medical professionals, there would be the issues of how many doctors that we have in our country that are actually from the Middle East and from Muslim countries. So he said, now we're going to have a shortage of doctors in our country as a result of the ban that Donald Trump, just because probably the sentiments that arose, in the anti-Muslim feelings.
There is no harm to mention some, good names like Arabs, Americans who did. We have many Arabs Americans in TV in Hollywood. We have one of them is Salma Hayek, is a well-known Arab, and we have a lot of Nobel Prize winners who are Arabs and Muslims. Like Safwan said, Arabs and Muslims are people like any other race and religion, and some of us are good at something, some of us are good for nothing, some of us are the best in something. When you ask an Arab, they do feel like they are the best people, but that doesn't mean they are the best people on this earth. One of them we have, as for Muslims Americans, we have Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, as great figures, Muslim figures here in the US that people can be proud of. And who else? There's many, a countless number of doctors, teachers, engineers, attorneys who are Muslims or Arabs. And I don't think listing them would be enough in one day. It's going to take you forever to list the people.
That is very true. And I think too, when you mentioned like Muhammad Ali, true, and Malcolm X and their upbringings, and kind of what Safwan, what you're talking about with the moral component of how the moral component, when you read, their autobiographies and such, and you look at their interviews, with so many of the issues of the inner city that you have and how they were able now to stay away from things like alcohol, stay away from, drugs, to have that life of, sobriety and a life of self, identification, realization, and how that really allowed them to be able to, to move forward, because there's, a lot of pitfalls in our free and open society that it's very not so easy to avoid. And so they always, speak of being a Muslim, being in Islam, and how it helped them to know who they were, and then be able to avoid many of the pitfalls, of society. Not to say they were perfect and such, but at least, how to, give them an opportunity to advance, in our free and open society, as you say. So they're big, parts of history, but they also, are preach and demonstrate, the positivity of Islam in their lives.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's where our conversation needs to go as America as well. The idea of moral freedom, right? The idea that, how can we as individuals, as people of faith or not faith, whatever it may be, how can we practically make this world better? How can we do that, right? And that's a moral conversation. I mean, doesn't have to have God in the equation, but that's a moral conversation. Ideas of good, ideas of bad, and how to share this world for the better. This is a moral conversation to have, and I think one of the things that having these kind of dialogues really opens up to is it makes you more aware of your moral choices. Not when I say moral choice, I don't mean like thou shalt not kill or steal. Sometimes people use that, think that's morality, that's in a nutshell. But really, in the sense of my personal moral choices that I take in every single day, which is to be compassionate, to know the other, to learn the other. These are moral choices a person makes. And to hate the other, and to not, be grudging to the other, or to put on a feigned tolerance to another. These are also moral choices, right? And so I think if we frame the conversation that way, and then look at the plethora of moral choices American citizens have adopted and offer, whether it's the Abrahamic religions or something outside the Abrahamic religion, and I'm biased. I'm an imam. I work in a religious position, so obviously I'm going to say that. But hey, maybe there's something to offer, right? Something to offer here. What can we see, and have that kind of discussion that can be more about higher objectives than just talking about, things in 150 characters or less on Twitter. I think that's where I think Americans, especially us, as we have this platform and we have this kind of privilege to share these voices, we need to start having that conversation. Like, what are the moral choices we can make to be better to each other?
Interesting. And and I guess and asking to that part, we're talking about the moral component, talking about religious, how do you do, like, with outreach, as far as sharing your religion? How does I don't know, we say the word evangelize, right? We have evangelists and things, but how does outreach go? And as far as reaching out to other people who are not Muslim, but is that something that that all of you is that something that you do? Is that a Muslim responsibility as well? How does that work?
So I mean, Islam is a proselytizing religion, right? The idea that it does seek to talk and have people embrace its viewpoint and its framework, and its theological framework, and also its political framework and whatnot framework. That's definitely there. But the way it's done is two ways, and it depends how much time you have to explain it. One is to do direct outreach and evangelize. This is something that's very common, especially in the South. I studied in Dallas, very common in the South, right? Which is the preaching method, right? You go out on the street and you preach and you preach and preach. Thankfully, what we preach is not really we're not screaming or anything like that. But you have that, right? We have tables with pamphlets. Learn about Islam. Learn about a Muslim. Have you met a Muslim? Wear the hijab. Hijab day. That's one way of doing it, and that works on demographics depending. In cities, that works really well because there's a crowd there. In universities, that works really well. But in our context, being in, say, Farmington Valley, for example, the way we do da'wah or outreach, DAWAH, outreach, is really just showing our presence, that we are part of the community. Like, we're really well really well tied with the Avon fire department. We have a community member here who's a fire cop who comes here, prays here, who does fire drills here. We have a liaison with the Avon Police Department. I'm going to send out an email to the Farmington Valley area schools about Ramadan and things like that. So that really, our way of outreach in that regard is really just showing our presence, because it's really about that. One of the principles in Islam that we have is you do not force anybody to become anything. People have their own agency. And if this Islam that I believe is so beautiful and has answers so many questions, if it's beautiful in and of itself, then you don't have to do so much unraveling, right? It's beautiful in and of itself. And just knowing and showing people your presence can do a lot of the work for you, especially when it comes to things like tragedies and people coming together for food share. We have a mobile food share that we have every Tuesday. Things of that nature is how we, especially in this kind of center, we do it, because it works better and it's really more helpful to the community at large. Excuse me.
From a regular person not holding any religious position or authority, I think reaching or telling about Islam, it's a duty of every Muslim by being a good Muslim, by being an example. So for me, I am obligated to deliver the message of God by being assembling or resembling the message of God itself. I am ordered to be modest. I be modest, and when people see modesty, what modesty looks like, they look at me. This is how we are obligated to deliver the message of God. Doing good to others. So basically, the Islam is to be a good Muslim. What is it? You do not lie. You be honest. You be punctual, which is, that's again, there is some misconception between culture and religion. And how I can, tell people what Islam is by following the Islam message, by doing what Islam told me what I should be doing, and I do it, then others will see what Islam within me.
Right. Does anyone else have a question that they wish to ask? That's it. How'd you have anything to share on that?
No, I think Safwan and Mariam did a good job.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't know if anyone else has a question. I know we have to about 8 o'clock. We do have a grace period, but well, I guess if that's about it, please take a moment if you can, if you're part of the audience, again, to fill out the survey that we have in the chat section there. You can probably take about 3 or 4 minutes. But again, just on behalf of the Simsbury Spirit Council and the Simsbury Public Library, Iman Safwan, Mariam, and Haj, we thank you for taking the time out to, just to share with us and to, to be open and to educate, to enlighten, to break down some stereotypes and all the above. But, it's, I could say it's a conversation we might not have on a normal basis, on a normal day. And so we do thank you for taking the time out, just to share your experiences, and just to, helps me out. So I'm sure, everyone else will be able to say the same thing for themselves personally. So yeah, so thank you for joining us in the audience. We will be here again for May for our next Simsbury Let's Talk. We'll be having one on Asian American History Month, and we'll be talking a little bit about, the rise and the uptick in the rise in anti-Asian prejudice and violence and hate crimes. And so we're going to have, a few panelists as well that's going to share, parts of their history, share parts of their experiences, what they've been through, what they're going through. And so again, just to try to shed some light on a major current issue that's going on. So Lindsay, we thank you from the Simsbury Public Library again for allowing, for hosting this with us, allowing us to utilize the platform. You've given us this Zoom opportunity. So yeah, I don't know if we want to end it like that. I don't know if you have Iman, if you could close us out with a prayer. Is that something you could do that for us?
Sure, if that's okay with everybody. So inshallah, please do join us in prayer. Put your minds and hearts together, even if we are distant in physically were still here with us together. Let us pray. We start off by thanking those who have allowed us to be together today. We thank the one we always thank for allowing us to speak to one another. And we ask the one we always ask to allow us to learn more from one another and to make this a starting point and not an ending point. We ask that we be compassionate to one another. We ask that we are loving to one another, and that when there are conflicts, that we compromise when needed, and we show forbearance and patience to that which we don't understand. And we ask the one we always ask for his love, for his grace, and to make us all embrace one another, and also to cure those who have been sick in this season, to allow us to go through this season and the summer and these months that are coming pain-free. And for those who are struggling and those who are in pain and those who are sick, we ask that they be recovered completely. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you again. Please take